I think one of the biggest mistakes people make today when buying a house is that they buy the house that they want today instead of buying a house for the life they want in 20 years. We almost did that. And I think it would have been a huge mistake. If you've watched my last video, you know that me and my husband decided to move from Colorado to North Carolina. And some of the biggest reasons we decided to do that is because we wanted more land. We wanted to homestead. We wanted to homeschool. We wanted to be in a position where we could actually take back some of our ownership of life. One of the big decisions that has come along with this move is figuring out like where we're going to live. Do we rent for a while? Do we buy an existing house? Do we build? There's a lot of options that we could have considered. Currently, we are renting. So we did rent sight unseen just because of the speed of which we had to make this move. And for anyone who knows me, that is not something I would ever do. I would never rent sight unseen. But, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. Now that we're renting, the clock is officially counting down. And so we've been trying to figure out what we're going to do once the lease ends. Are we going to continue renting? Are we going to find a new place to rent? Are we going to buy a house? We're going to build? What is the decision that we're going to make here? And we've ultimately decided to build our next home. I do think that there are a few things that we've learned along the way that might help you all make a decision for you and your family if you are considering new construction. So before I get into it, I do have something to admit. I do have a bias for new construction. The house I grew up in, was born and raised in Detroit, was by no means a new build, right? My mom and my dad looked for a home. They found this home. We moved into it when I was only a couple of months old. And it is essentially where I was raised for my entire life until I went to college. And even when I graduated college, I moved back in with my mom. And so lived in that house for a very long time. But since I moved out on my own as an adult, every single apartment that I have ever rented, even the house that I purchased in Denver, was new construction. And so that has kind of created this unrealistic expectation that every place I live will be brand new. I know a lot of people like existing builds. They like the character. They like the charm. And I like those things in theory, but in practice, I just really enjoy being the only person that's ever lived in a space. I just really can't explain it. Every time I go tour an existing home, I just walk in there and I think someone else has lived here, and it kind of turns me off. I say all that to say, I know that sounds so privileged of me, and I understand how lucky and blessed I have been to be able to even experience new construction and live in brand new places. But I'm just sharing my bias because when we moved here, I automatically thought that we might go into a build situation. So I will admit that even though we have toured a lot of existing homes, I kind of had a decision in my mind that I wanted to build. So with that said, we toured a lot of homes. We toured existing homes. We toured a lot of different builders that were building. We looked at a lot of different communities in a lot of different areas. We're brand new to the Charlotte area, and so we didn't even know what area we wanted to live in. We looked at different layouts and even different price points just to see what our money could buy here. I really wanted to just overall understand what was out there before we made such a big financial decision. And there were definitely some beautiful homes that we saw, but there were a few things that stuck out to us about the builder, the land, and the home that we ultimately are moving forward with to build. But before I get into why we chose that specific builder, that specific land, all of those things, I do want to kind of mention one thing that I don't think a lot of people realize when they're thinking about making the decision to purchase a new build. Purchasing a new build is really expensive. It takes a lot of cash, a lot of liquidity, like money in hand, to be able to go through a new build process. We're not just talking about qualifying for a new mortgage. We're talking about earnest money, design deposits, upgrades, inspections, all of the little things that kind of come with the process. Earnest money, for example, is something that you have to put down on a lot for them to even start building your home. I've seen earnest money deposits as low as $5,000 to earnest money deposits that are $50,000. So it really depends on the builder, like where you're building and the price points. But that's cash you have to have the day of to secure the lot and for them to start building your property. Another big piece of cash in hand that you have to have in order to, like, what I call it is play the game, is a design deposit. If you've ever done a new construction, essentially you'll sign, you give the earnest money away, and then you immediately go into the design process, which basically is the fun part. It's the part where you go into the design studio, pick out all of your finishes, countertops, floors, all of those types of things. But what comes along with those decisions is that you usually have to put down a deposit. Let's just say you went to the design studio and you spent $40,000 in upgrades. You would need to have a percentage of that the day of in order to secure those design selections. That's already potentially thousands of dollars. And so I actually think that being able to build is an extreme privilege. I feel blessed and lucky that I even have been put into the position the second time now to be able to build and participate in new construction. Because like I said, you have to have a lot in savings to be able to play the game and get your house built. So if someone were to ask me, is new building the way to go for them? I would say, look at your budget, look at what you can save, and then make a decision based off that. Because like I said, there is a lot of cash in hand that you need to hand over immediately to even start the process for your new home. One of the reasons why I think building was the decision that we decided to move forward with is that I mentioned a little bit earlier that we're currently renting while our house is being built. And renting has just reminded me how much I value home ownership. Not because I necessarily need expensive finishes or the best of everything, but because I like making a house feel like ours. I like hanging pictures. I like painting the walls. I like doing design and accents. I like doing little projects around the house. And while, yes, you can change some things in a rental and you can hang pictures and that sort of thing, you also gotta leave it in the condition you found it, which means every wall you painted gotta be repainted back to what it was. Every hole you put in the wall has to be patched over for the next owners. And so nothing you actually do and put money into is gonna stay with the house. It's all just a temporary thing that you need to fix and repair back to its original state. I hadn't rented in years since before we had the house. And so I didn't realize how much I actually valued being able to make a space my own. The second, and I think the biggest reason why we decided to build is because at the end of the day, we realized that we're not really shopping for a house. We're trying to actually build a life. And once we started looking at this decision, this house shopping through that lens, building just made the most logical sense for our family. As I mentioned in my previous video, which I'll link here, one of the things we really wanted to do with our next house is one, we wanted to have land. We really wanted to have enough space for our kids to be able to run around. I wanted to be able to homestead and garden, and I wanted privacy for my next home. I really wanted a place that I could feel comfortable in and have enough space that we wouldn't outgrow it. And our last house just was not that. Once we started looking at houses that had acreage and that had a really good amount of square footage, we were literally looking at some really expensive houses. We either couldn't find houses that had both the square footage and the acre of land, or when we did find houses that were existing that had the acreage and also had the amount of square footage we needed, they were in the millions of dollars, which we are not in a position to afford. One thing people don't tell you is that just because the bank says you qualify for a certain amount doesn't mean you should actually buy it or that you can afford it. We qualify for considerably more than what we're spending. But if buying a more expensive home meant that we were giving up the land and the flexibility that we want, then it actually wasn't a better choice, and it's not the decision that we feel like we should have made. When we made this decision, we gave up a lot of the conveniences that we used to have. We chose land over the most luxurious build. We chose privacy on a 1-acre lot over being down the street from a Target. But with where my family and I are headed, being less dependent on systems and being more dependent on ourselves, this is the best next step for us. And I keep having to remind myself as I'm making these decisions that that's why I'm making these decisions, because sometimes you do get distracted by the really shiny objects and the most beautiful house and having the convenience of a grocery store right next door or having a park in your neighborhood. But what I keep coming back to is what I'm trying to build for my family. And I know ultimately we're making the best choice from where we want to be in 20 years. And we're not necessarily making choices based off the most convenient thing or the thing that's the easiest. We're doing it for the life that we want. My hope isn't that you go and build a house. My hope is that whatever decision that you're making next, you start with the life that you want to build and then let your decisions support that. I think one of the things you'll notice as this channel begins to grow is that almost every big decision that me and my family make starts with the exact same question. Does this move us closer to the life we're trying to build? Sometimes the answer will be about a house. Sometimes it'll be about work. Sometimes it'll be about motherhood and business and faith. But I'm excited to share all of those decisions with you as we figure them out in real time. In the next video, I'm going to share with you how we chose the community that we're building in, because that ended up being a much harder decision than I actually expected. All right, y'all. So thanks for hanging in there with me. I will see you all in the next one. Bye.